It's too bad that some of the young people that were killed over the weekend didn't have guns, attached to their hips.
If some of those wonderful people had guns strapped right here, if some of those great people that were in that club that night had guns strapped to their waists,
had people been able to fire back, it would have been a much different outcome.
1 week ago today, presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump made that statement and several identical comments to various news media. And it's not presumptive at all to listen to those words and hear what he was saying. A very popular line of thinking by millions of people across America. In situations such as the Orlando mass killing, many people believe if some of those in the crowd were carrying guns, it could have saved lives by cutting down the killer with return fire. Donald Trump today claimed that he never suggested, nor was he suggesting, clubgoers should have been armed, rather that he was misunderstood. And what he was actually stating is that if within the club you had people with guns, employees for instance, guards or employees, things might be different. Whether you believe he misspoke once again about a controversial issue or simply pulled another Trumpian flop, the issue remains out there for discussion, as is the number of old and new gun control regulations lawmakers believe we need to, at the very least, begin the process of taking guns out of the hands of criminals. Today, the Senate was set to vote on 4 bills that would deal with firearms and background checks. But even 8 days after blood was running in buckets on a nightclub floor, they're expected to go nowhere and once again flow down the drain, much like the blood of innocents. Why are we here yet again? And what are the answers from both sides of the debate to ensure we don't have to crank this up every time a psycho decides it's time to kill? Your phone calls, your comments, stand ready when called, or you can sit as the case may be. Stay on point, be brief. Line up right now at 1-877-Newsmax, 1-877-639-7629. Let's welcome the former elected DA who is known as the Second Amendment guru and author of Infringed, considered the ultimate legal reference manual for American gun owners, Alexandria Kincaid. Joined by the retired Baltimore police officer, Marine Corps veteran, multiple author, and a proponent of a new era in policing, Michael Wood. I want to thank you both for joining us very much. Michael, let me begin with you. The comment that Donald Trump made when he talks about people being armed. I want you to speak to this as someone who has been involved in these incidents before, who knows the reality. There are those who say that you put people in there, they're armed, they'll drop the bad guy. But I got a lot of friends in law enforcement who tell me that's the last thing we need is people out there, 4, 5, 6, 7 guns out there blowing more shots in a large space because they're going to kill more people than they're going to help. What's the reality?
Let me tell you, my fundamental position should be able to answer any of these questions. And it's an acknowledgement of that reality that our current model right now is that to get out of poverty or to get somewhere in life, somebody like me is given this promise to join the Marine Corps. And at 17, I'm given a very same type of weapon, an M16, and I'm trained to kill, and I'm in this gun culture, and I'm expected to be the one who pays the price for this discussion of guns and who should have them. It's my brothers and sisters that I stood beside, and your sons and daughters who are expected to die in the sands of a foreign country protecting this right. And then it comes home, and then somebody like me stands on that wall again in the police department, and we don't know what to do because everyone around has guns. How do we distinguish this impossible task of knowing who has guns and who doesn't have guns? Who's the bad guys and who's the good guys when we live in a country that has more guns than it has people? And it's so easy because no one that's really making this philosophical argument is the one that is paying the price for this. It is our cops who are expected to put their life on the line and take these bullets and fight back like they're some kind of heroes in the wild, wild west, and their families pay, and it's marginalized and disenfranchised communities and the cops that respond to those places who have to deal with a ricochet bullet or a stray bullet slicing through the brain of a 9-year-old, and that trauma descends throughout the entire community. But as long as somebody can sit there in an ivory tower and not have to be the one to pay the price for this, they can have all kinds of wonderful ideologies. And now I hope I don't have to sit back and listen to us appeal to the authority of men who lived hundreds of years ago in a different era, who also believed that Miss Kincaid shouldn't have even had the privilege to have or right to even have a say in this matter.
All right, very well put. Now, Alex, let me come to you on this because, quite frankly, what Donald Trump said fell right in line against the NRA because the NRA came out and said, wait a minute, we're not saying that drunk people having alcohol should have weapons. That's absolutely wrong. So he misspoke on that one as well. But doesn't Michael make a good point here when he talks about the fact that you can't just have people holding weapons and all of a sudden just a number of people starting to shoot in a small space? Isn't that dangerous?
Right, because we hear about that every day, right? I think actually what we're seeing on the news is that law-abiding Americans with guns are saving lives. So what Michael said doesn't make any sense to me. In fact, I'm not sure I even followed all of what he was saying because it was so untrue. Law enforcement can't be there all the time. They are not there. They were not there in Orlando. What could have saved the day was a good guy with the gun. We see it each and every day in the news that concealed carriers, open carried, trained law-abiding Americans actually save lives, and they're taking responsibility for themselves and for their families. This theory that he has that bullets are flying and cops are getting hit by law-abiding American citizens carrying firearms for self-defense purposes just isn't happening.
All right, now let me just, if you don't mind, let me just interject something here because I do want to just, let's settle this down here because you said good guy with a gun. I get that, and a lot of people get that as well. However, in a situation like this, aren't we looking at where if you have 3 or 4 or 5 good guys with a gun, isn't it then difficult for the cops to basically decide which one is the good guy and which one is the bad guy? Isn't that, even if it's just one instance, dangerous, Alex?
No, because if you're trained with a firearm, you know when the police arrive, you let them take control. So it's not like we have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 people with guns shooting and spraying bullets around. What you're going to have is someone with a gun who takes control of that situation, puts the bad guy on the floor, and saves lives. That's what happens when a good person has a gun. And to say that that right should be taken away in any zone, even in a bar, is wrong. I don't want to get into what Donald Trump said or didn't say or what the NRA position is with that. But we have a law in my home state of Idaho that says, you know what, if you're drinking, you can't concealed carry. We don't make bars gun-free zones, and you know what? Our state is not in the news all the time.
Let me stop you there because I'm running short on time here. I want to make sure we get a couple of things in here. I appreciate that, but I want to make sure we get a couple of things in here. Michael, very, very briefly, are you suggesting that we take guns away from law-abiding citizens?
I'm suggesting that we completely rethink what we're going about. What Ms. Kincaid is talking about, it's amazing that she's a lawyer because we can actually Google these things. I witnessed 3 cops in my own jurisdiction gunned down by friendly fire. So she's saying all of our cops aren't good people?
Right, and you see all kinds of facts that aren't true. I've seen your website. No, I've seen your website. You talk about all the mass shootings we have in this country. They don't happen around the world. It's horrible that people have this many guns and they have access to things like AR-15s. That simply isn't true, and your facts are wrong.
Let him finish, please, Alex.
I am a lawyer, and I do know what I'm talking about.
Let him finish, Alex. Please be brief. Go ahead, Michael.
The simple fact is that even officers gun down other officers because they can't distinguish the difference. She can sit in her ivory tower with all the other people that want to view this way, but when you're on the street and you're doing the real work of the people standing on that wall that you hide behind, don't come talk to us about what it's really like.
I only got 2 minutes left. I need to get this in here. A new poll, a CNN ORC poll that came out today, showed support for tighter gun control laws increasing 9 percentage points after the Orlando attack. Support for background checks and other measures being debated in the Senate, around 90%. That's big news. However, the first 2 votes today in Washington, D.C. First was the amendment by Chuck Grassley to enhance funding for existing gun background check system, defeated 53-47. Second measure by Senator Chris Murphy, expand gun background checks, close the so-called gun show loophole, defeated 44-56. I'm just double checking here. The final vote tally 44-56. Okay, very briefly, 30 seconds from each of you. Alex, how do we stop this circling of the drain every single time somebody gets killed?
Well, number one, let's focus on the problem. The problem is criminals and terrorists. And if we had an administration that would focus on those 2 things, we would have a much better world. It's not an AR-15 that's jumping out there and killing people. There are people behind that gun that are pulling the trigger and slaughtering the innocent.
Okay, same thing to you then, Michael. What do we do to stop being here every single time people are murdered and butchered?
It would be a really good start to stop listening to people who sit in ivory towers and start listening to the people that are actually doing the work and not pretending to know that which
Okay, well, I'll give you this. You've used the phrase ivory towers 3 times. With all due respect, then, give me something that is a starting point here instead of a cliche, please.
Sure, I go a lot over it on the Joe Rogan show. Like, we can do things like stop manufacturing. Whatever your reason is that you want a weapon, we can solve that with a shotgun and with a bolt-action rifle. You can have as many as you want. It's handguns and semi-automatic weapons that put cops, soldiers, and every citizen in this country in danger. We cannot create a scenario where we protect the life, liberty, and happiness of our citizens in this current environment. So what you're doing is making it so people cannot go to a club and express their happiness and peace and satisfaction because you throw up some kind of thing like, oh, it's terrorism or oh, it's this, and it's not. These things are facts that you can look up.
I'm out of time, unfortunately. Alex, you want a 10-second retort real quick?
Let's just focus on the problem. That's my retort. Terrorists and criminals and law-abiding Americans should have guns.
Well, there are homegrown terrorists as well that we need to talk about. And this one was born in Queens. Let's keep that in mind. Michael Wood Jr., Alexandria Kincaid, I want to thank you both for joining us very much. The turmoil from London, nothing to do with the latest crack from Ricky Gervais. We're also going to try to get to more of your phone calls. Stay on the line as the Hardline continues right here on Newsmax.